Today, we're diving into a case that really makes you think about what it means to be guilty. It's the story of a man who killed someone, that part's not up for debate, but who the law, in the end, said was not a criminal.
This quote from the Supreme Court is pretty much the key to this whole story. It's asking a really fundamental question. Should we judge the actions of a person with a broken mind by the exact same standards we use for everyone else? That idea is really at the heart of everything we're going to talk about.
So, let's just start with the cold, hard, undisputed fact of the matter. On March 12, 2009, Solomon Verdadero took a Rambo knife and he killed a man named Romeo Plata. There's no mystery about it, no question about who did it.
But then, there's this second fact, which is just as true, but seems to completely contradict the first one. After years of court battles, the highest court in the land acquitted him, found him not guilty of any crime.
So how is that even possible? I mean, how can you kill someone, have everybody agree that you did it, and still end up with no criminal conviction? Well, that's the big puzzle we're going to piece together in this explainer.
To really get the verdict, we have to understand what happened on the day of the crime. So let's go back to that tragic afternoon.
The whole thing started over something you wouldn't expect, a stolen fan belt from an irrigation pump. So Romeo Plata and his son, they go to the police station to report it, and that leads to a confrontation with Verdadero right there. A little bit after they all leave the station, Verdadero attacks Romeo, stabbing him twice in the back. Tragically, Romeo died from his injuries when he got to the hospital.
Okay, so the crucial thing to get here is that this was never a whodunit. Everyone knew who did it. Verdadero was arrested right there at the scene. So the entire legal fight from the very beginning was all about one single invisible question. What was going on inside Solomon Verdadero's head at that exact moment?
And that brings us to the only real argument the defense could make. Insanity. Now, you hear about this in movies all the time, right? But in the real world, it is incredibly difficult to prove. The legal bar is set just unbelievably high. And you gotta pay attention to the words the law uses here. It's not just about having a mental illness. It demands a complete deprivation of intelligence. That means the person had absolutely no clue what they were doing, no real concept of right and wrong. They were acting, as the law puts it, without the least discernment.
So, to win this, the defense had to prove two things, and prove them with really clear evidence. First, that Verdadero's mental illness basically stole his ability to reason. And second, and this is always the toughest part, that this complete breakdown was happening at the exact moment he was attacking Romeo Plata. It's not enough to be sick before or after, it has to be during.
Now, the defense wasn't just pulling this out of thin air. Verdadero had a long, documented history of serious mental illness. He'd been an outpatient at a psychiatric department since 1999, so for a decade. He was formally diagnosed with schizophrenia 6 years before the killing. His illness was chronic, it was severe, and it was all on paper.
But even with that long medical history, this was no slam dunk, not even close. In fact, for years, it looked like Solomon Verdadero was going to prison.
The first two courts that heard this case, they both landed on the exact same conclusion: guilty. They saw his history of schizophrenia, sure, but they argued that the defense just didn't prove he wasn't having a lucid interval, basically a moment of clarity when he did it. They said, look, a history of being sick just isn't enough. And those guilty verdicts were very, very real. Solomon Verdadero was sentenced to between 12 and 17 years in prison. And for a while there, it really seemed like the case was closed.
But it wasn't closed. The case got appealed all the way up to the Supreme Court. And it was there, looking at the exact same evidence, that the justices saw something that the other courts had apparently missed.
The Supreme Court's entire decision really came down to them looking at the evidence in a new light. They believed that two specific testimonies, when you put them together, painted a really clear picture of what was going on in Verdadero's mind that day. Okay, first up was the expert, Dr. Ethel Pedudu. When she was asked straight up if Verdadero was having a schizophrenic relapse on the very day of the stabbing, her answer was a crystal clear yes. She confirmed his violence was a symptom of that relapse. And then came the second testimony, and this one is just wow. It came from the most unexpected person you can imagine, Maynard Plata, the victim's own son. He was right there with Verdadero at the police station just moments before the attack. And when he was asked what he saw, he said, plain as day, that Verdadero was not again in his proper mind. And here is where the Supreme Court put it all together.
See, on one hand, you have the psychiatrist describing the classic symptoms of a relapse, and on the other hand, you have the victim's own son describing those exact same behaviors just moments before the attack: the violence, the unsound mind, even the reddish eyes. The expert and the eyewitness were basically telling the exact same story from two different angles.
So with that, the Supreme Court overturned the guilty verdicts. But what does that really mean? An acquittal because of insanity isn't a get-out-of-jail-free card. It's something else entirely.
So here's the final breakdown. Verdadero was acquitted of the crime, so no criminal record for it. But, and this is a big but, he was not set free. The court ordered him to be confined in a mental health facility for treatment. He can't get out unless his doctors and a judge both agree he's no longer a danger. And, really crucially, he was still held civilly liable.
Civil liability means he still had to pay the victim's family for their loss. The court ordered him to pay a total of 180,000 pesos. And that shows you a really important legal idea. You can be blameless in the eyes of criminal law, but still be held responsible for the harm that you caused.
So, what's the big takeaway from all this? The Verdadero case really shows us that the law makes a fine distinction between a crime, which is an act done with wrongful intent, and a tragedy, an act caused by a mind that's just completely lost its connection to reason. One demands punishment, the other demands treatment.
This whole case leaves us with a really deep and difficult question. When the cause of a terrible act isn't malice, but a brain that isn't working right, what does justice really look like? Is it a prison cell, or is it a hospital room? It's a question with no easy answers.